All right, today we're diving into something that feels like it's been pulled straight from a sci-fi movie. By 2026, Neuralink is planning to go from just a handful of clinical trials to mass-producing brain implants. This is way more than just another update. We're talking about a plan to basically industrialize the human brain. So yeah, let's get right into it.
And there it is, right from the source. Look, he's not talking about just another small trial here. This is a full-on declaration. They want to mass-produce brain chips and make the surgery almost entirely automated. We're talking about a factory line for your brain.
And that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, the tech itself is moving at an absolutely insane speed. But is the world, really ready for what comes next? We're not just talking about medicine anymore, we're talking about society and maybe even what it means to be human.
Okay, so let's break this down. What does this massive shift from a small trial to a full-blown industry actually look like? Well, for one, it's a huge operational change, and it's being fueled by some serious cash.
Get this, $9 billion. That's what Neuralink is valued at after their 2025 funding round. This tells you everything you need to know. This isn't some quirky research project tucked away in a lab anymore. We're watching an industrial giant being born, and it has the war chest to chase after these wild ambitions.
And this right here, this is the core of that shift. Think about it. We're going from, a handful of very carefully monitored people in a study to a future where this surgery could be happening over and over, almost like it's on an assembly line. The whole business model is flipping from research and development straight to manufacturing.
Okay, so before we go any further, what is this thing actually? To really get a handle on the plan to scale it up, we've got to understand the tech at the heart of it all.
So a brain-computer interface, or BCI, is basically a bridge. It's a translator. It listens to the tiny electrical sparks your brain uses to think and talk to itself, and it translates that into a language a computer can understand. It's literally turning your thoughts into digital commands.
Now, for Neuralink's implant, the magic number is 1024. So why does that number matter so much? It all comes down to resolution. Think of it like pixels on a screen. More electrodes mean you get a much clearer, more detailed picture of what the brain is saying. And that clarity, that translates into incredible, fine-tuned control.
And get this, those 1,000+ electrodes are spread out over 64 tiny flexible threads, and each one is actually thinner than a single human hair. So you can just imagine the engineering challenge here, right? How in the world do you weave something that delicate directly into the brain's cortex without causing a bunch of damage? Well, that's a job that's way beyond what a human surgeon can do.
Yeah, trying to place something that tiny and fragile, that takes a level of precision that a human hand just doesn't have. And this is where Neuralink's other big innovation comes into play, the R1 surgical robot.
This robot, this is the secret sauce for their plan to scale up. Okay, so here's how it works. First, the robot maps out all the blood vessels in the brain in real time, so it knows exactly what to avoid. Super important. Then, it starts inserting those 64 threads with insane precision, about one every second and a half. But honestly, the real game changer is this third step, something they call the dura-through technique. See, instead of removing the brain's tough protective outer layer, the dura, the robot inserts the threads right through it. This makes the whole procedure way faster, much safer, and a lot less invasive. This is the automation that makes the idea of high-volume production even possible.
So the tech is obviously mind-blowing, but what really brings this all home is the human impact. Let's talk about how this is already changing the lives of the very first people to use it.
So Neuralink's first trial with people is called the PRIME study. And its goal is, well, it's pretty straightforward, but also incredibly profound. Give people with severe paralysis, quadriplegia, the ability to control things like computers and phones just by using their thoughts. It's about restoring their digital freedom.
And meet Noland Arbaugh. He's the very first person to receive the implant. He was paralyzed in a diving accident, and now he can play online chess and video games for hours on end. He controls the cursor on his computer just by thinking. He's described it as totally life-changing, giving him back a sense of independence and connection.
And, they're not stopping at just controlling a cursor on a screen. The next study on the roadmap is called Convoy, and this one is all about using the BCI to control robotic arms and legs. The goal is to go from digital freedom to actual physical freedom.
All right, so when you have an ambition this massive, you're not going to be the only one in the game. Neuralink is obviously a huge player, but they are far from alone. There is a whole new, super competitive industry popping up around this exact technology.
Check this number out.
$1.29 billion. That's how much money Neuralink has raised so far. It just goes to show you the insane amount of money pouring into this space, and all that cash is fueling this really intense race to see who will dominate the commercial BCI market.
So here's a quick look at the competitive landscape. You've got Neuralink with their approach of putting threads directly into the brain. But then you've got competitors like Synchron who are using a much less invasive method. It's kind of like a stent. And then there's precision neuroscience with a thin film that just rests on the surface of the brain. And what's really fascinating here is that Precision already has FDA clearance for temporary use. It shows that there might be faster ways to get to market if you choose a less invasive route. Everybody's placing a different bet on how to win this race.
And this really highlights the fundamental strategic trade-off happening in the BCI world. You've got Neuralink's strategy, which is kind of high risk, high reward. You go directly into the brain, you get the absolute best signal quality. And then, on the other side, you have a company like Synchron, whose method completely avoids open brain surgery, but the trade-off is a much weaker, lower resolution signal. So the billion-dollar question becomes, what's more important to the market in the long run? Pinpoint precision or maximum safety?
So all of this, it leads us to the final and maybe the most critical question of all. Where is this technology actually taking us?
You know, when you start talking about manufacturing these things at scale, you're forced to face some absolutely massive ethical questions. Like, who owns the data that's coming literally out of your head? How do you stop something like neural hacking? And what about long-term safety? What does an implant like this do to your brain over decades? Things like scarring on the brain tissue. And then there's the big one. What happens when this technology stops being about restoring function for people with injuries and starts being about enhancing abilities for perfectly healthy people?
Because let's be crystal clear about this. For Elon Musk, the ultimate goal here isn't just medical. The long-term vision, the one he talks about all the time, is to create a true symbiosis between human consciousness and AI. The idea is to help humanity keep up. All this incredible medical work we're seeing now, that's just step one.
And so here's where we land. A technology that can give someone who's paralyzed their independence back it's undeniably a wonderful thing. But as we stand right on the edge of being able to industrialize the human brain, we have to ask ourselves some tough questions. We have to decide what lines we should draw, if any. That line between healing and enhancing, it's getting blurrier by the day. And the conversation about where we as a society decide to draw it, well, that conversation is really just getting started.